Hi, this is the Extraordinary Tourist speaking, and welcome to part 2 of my one day in my studio videos. This video I'm just creating for those of you who are in my hardcore viewer bases and have seen the first video and want to watch me paint the rest of this painting. This second video is actually run over 2 days, and you'll see at about the point where I change shirts is the exact point where it goes into the third day. So what I thought I'd do is just, rather than just put an entire music track over this vision of me painting the artwork, is perhaps give you a little bit of commentary about what I'm doing and in the video and things about it and whatever. And this is entirely unscripted, so if I and ah a lot or have a lot of pauses, you'll just have to bear with me because I'm just watching the video and speaking whatever comes to mind. So the artwork itself that you can see me painting at the moment, this is day 2, and as you can tell it was still quite cold because I'm wearing a beanie and my jacket. I was going to say the artwork ended up being called Bluey Fishing, which is the name Bluey that I gave to the cat, because if you look closely at the finished artwork you'll see that the cat's fur features quite a lot of sort of blue tints and stuff, which is not really surprising considering that the whole colour palette is shades of blue and white. So what I'm doing here is just blocking in a very dark navy blue, almost black, and sort of using it as obviously for dark areas that are actually in these dark colours, but also for shadow, which you can see on the jetty pole that is behind the cat that has the rope and whatever tied to it. It's just shadow because that pole is actually a sort of white, meant to be a white colour, and it's just the sort of light and reflections that are giving it a blue tint to it. And with this video and the last one, I didn't want to do yet another sort of time-lapse sped up footage, so what I've actually done is showed you what it looks like with me painting in real time, but I've just taken like a minute of real-time footage at various points so that you're not sort of watching me paint the same sort of spot on the painting for like 3 or 4 or 5 minutes at a time. It's just to give you an idea of the speed at which I paint at and sort of the way I use my brush and those kinds of things. And I wanted to just give you a sense of what it's like actually painting in real time rather than the sped up footage. Should talk about when I choose my colours. Like with my videos you've seen me talk a lot about doing the underpainting, which is where I use primary colours to sort of create areas that are going to be light using yellow, and areas that are mid-tones using red, and areas of shadow using blue and green. But I haven't been able to talk a lot about how I choose my colours after that, simply because to talk while I'm painting is very distracting, and it takes a lot longer to get a painting done if I do that after I've done the base colours. So with this painting, when I started, I had an overall idea that I wanted it to be a very sort of blue painting overall. That would be the dominant colour, because obviously the background is sky and I wanted it to be sort of daytime rather than, like with some of my other paintings, they have a feeling of being either sunrise or sunset because the background uses a lot of purples and reds and yellows, whereas this one is more midday. And I also chose blues because obviously it's a seaside picture, and I wanted to give it a kind of a Mediterranean nautical seaside sort of feel, but not the usual beachy sort of warm colours that you would expect, say perhaps from a beach scene. I wanted more of the cool colours that you would associate with things like boating and fishing and those kinds of activities, rather than fun in the sun. So that was where the concept for the blue colour schemes came from. And in terms of the colours I used on the cat, using navy blues and whatever in the cat's furs, if you've seen a lot of my previous cat paintings, you'll know there's one particular character called Jack, who I sometimes refer to as Happy Cat Jack, who has very orange fur, and I've painted that sort of colour scheme on a cat quite a lot, even on cats that aren't Jack. So I wanted to do a different kind of colour scheme for this cat, and I kind of like the sort of blackish grey colour scheme that perhaps you see on some of the Egyptian cats, I think is the breed, that has a sort of it's not quite grey, but it's sort of a browny grey colour, and I actually have a pet cat that's in that colour scheme, living with me, although it's not an Egyptian cat, it's just a sort of crossbreed, standard house cat kind of look to it. So that's what I based this cat's colour scheme on, but obviously because I wanted the sort of blue theme all throughout, I gave the cat's fur sort of a blue tinge to it, using the navies and the light blues, which sort of comes into another colour scheme that I've seen on cats, which is a kind of a silvery grey, sort of hint of blue tint kind of colouring that you see. So that's where that came from. And you'll see like the fish is also using blues and navy blue and that, similar to the cat. I was sort of thinking that perhaps the fish would have that silver colouring that a lot of fish have, and its colour scheme is simply reflecting the colours around it so that it ends up with a blue tinge as well. And again, when I was selecting colours for the bucket, even that has the navy blues and sort of whites going through it, and I was thinking, well, the bucket is an old wooden bucket, and it was probably a fairly weathered version of that, and you see like weathered wood sometimes goes a greyish colour, and that's what I was thinking for the bucket. So again, that kind of ties that in. You sort of go with the greyish colour of the bucket and add a bit of a blue tint to it, and it doesn't look so out of place in those colours, because it does kind of make sense. The only thing I will say about the composition of this painting in terms of things like the bucket if you were to compare that bucket to, say, an actual person fishing, and also the fishing rod behind the cat, they're probably actually way out of scale, and the bucket would be at best a bait bucket rather than a bucket that you would keep any kind of fish in, and the fishing rod would perhaps be the kind of fishing rod that perhaps a sort of beginning fisher person might use rather than a sort of experienced fisherman. But both things are just there to sort of as props. It's not really important that they be to scale, and if they were, the bucket would probably dominate more than what the cat does, and the cat is really the focus of this picture, so hence that's why the bucket is so small. When I was making these videos, I edited together all the footage, which ended up being about half an hour of footage out of 9 hours that I actually filmed. So if you were really wanting to see me paint from start to finish, the entire process, you could watch in real time if I wanted to edit that together, but you would have to sit and watch like 9 hours of me just painting, and if you've managed to sit through sort of whatever this is, I think it's about 17 minutes of just me painting in real time at various points, then, and not found that boring, then maybe you could sit through 9 hours, I don't know, but hopefully this format is reasonably interesting to watch, and I am looking at other ways I can sort of show myself painting that is perhaps different to just doing the time-lapse stuff, because although the time-lapse is interesting to watch, it tends to be all from one camera angle, and sometimes I think that's just a little bit tedious, and for me personally I'd like to see more camera angles and perhaps even show me painting much closer so you can actually see the brush and the paint being applied and those kinds of things, but it's very difficult to do all that because it becomes distracting from the actual creation of the artwork, and it completely sort of throws the flow of working, and in some respects takes some of the I don't know if you could call it pleasure of painting out of it, because you're trying to do 2 or 3 things at once and create an interesting video at the same time as you're trying to create a pleasing artwork that you hope is going to capture people's imagination and will eventually find a buyer. So this last bit is just where on all my pictures I usually mask around the edges, because I find if I paint up to the edge it influences the way my picture, and sometimes where I want a rounded curve near an edge it tends to become square. So if I put the masking tape on, it allows me to keep my curves rounded, because I can actually sort of draw off the edge onto the masking tape without interrupting the flow of my curves. And plus I like taking the masking tape off and seeing that crisp edge around the edge. It gives an added feeling of having finished the painting. All up, this painting has taken me 3 sessions over 3 days to complete, and it's been quite hard keeping myself motivated to get this one finished. I don't really know why that is, but I suspect it's partly due to the colour palette that I'm using. It's because it's such a limited palette in that I've chosen to use sort of blues and whites to sort of give this artwork a nautical kind of feel. It's meant I've had to think a lot more about my colour choices and where things are going, and consequently that's made the work harder and more difficult to get into. But overall I'm pretty happy with the end result, and yeah, I think this is a fairly different looking artwork to some of those that I've done previously.